Hi guys, welcome back to City Self-Sufficiency. In this episode we're going to be looking at cutting and curing beef to make jerky. So to make the marinade, first of all, we're going to need a few basic ingredients. You're going to need some soft brown sugar, some dark soy sauce, some malt vinegar, some paprika, and a strong airtight Tupperware box to seal the meat in. So to your Tupperware box, per 100 grams of meat, you need to add in 2 tablespoons of the soft brown sugar, 3 tablespoons of the dark soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of your malt vinegar, and then about half a tablespoon of the paprika. Pop everything to one side, seal the tub, and then just stir it around. And then pop that to one side while we cut the meat down. So when you're selecting meat for jerky, there's a couple of things that you want to remember. First of all, you need a nice balance between meat and fat. The fat in it is where most of the flavour comes from, but at the same time it's also what makes the meat go off faster. So you want just sort of a light marbling through it, not like great big chunks of fat in the meat. And you certainly don't want any of this sort of sinew along the sides, nor that. If you see that run of white there through the meat, that's sinew, that is, and you need to cut that one out because it's going to go really tough in the drying process. Also, something else you need to remember with jerky is that unlike biltong, where if you remember it was thick slabs of meat that we were using, jerky, you want it to be as small and as fine as possible. The whole point of jerky is that it dries really quickly. So you need it to be little thin strips of meat. And for that, it's really difficult to cut actually if the meat is too fresh. So what I've done with this is I've popped it in the freezer, and it's been in there for about 4 hours. Just so that it's become a little bit firmer than it normally is. It makes it easier to cut. And then what you do is you just want to slice up little thin strips from the end. Obviously, the bigger the pieces are, the more jerky you're going to have. It depends on how you eat it. I like mine as snacks. So I want little pieces, thin pieces that I can just sort of pop in my mouth one at a time. Don't have to chew on them too much. And then we just slowly cut down each of the steaks. Like this. So once you've got a goodly sort of pile of meat, and this should be enough to last me for probably a week or so, that should be, then it's time to get it marinating. So if we bring our marinade back in, and then meat just gets put in that. Try to spread them out a little bit. You want to make sure they're not going to stick together too much. And once they're all in, lid back on, and give it a good shake. Just so you know that everything is definitely thoroughly coated in there. Then we pop that now into the fridge, and it'll wait there for about 3 hours for that much meat. It doesn't need to cure overnight. It's not like biltong. It doesn't take anywhere nearly that long, and you don't want to be that strong because they're much smaller pieces of meat. You just want plenty of time for the flavour to seep in, and also for the soy sauce, the salt in that, to kill off any possible bacteria. So right, into the fridge with you. So our meat has now been curing for 3 hours in the fridge, so it's ready to be taken out. Side. And you can see the meat has changed colour now. It's gone much darker as it's taken on. The soy sauce especially really does darken the meat up. So what we need to do now is we just need to remove the excess marinade. To do that, take a clean cloth. This is just a J cloth. You could use anything. You could use a paper towel if it's easier. And then just take each piece out. We just lie them on there. Then just move them around just to remove the excess liquid. You still want them to be damp, you still want them to be wet, you don't want them to dry out completely. We'll just sort of move them around just to remove anything that's going to drip, basically. So once you're reasonably happy that the meat is as dry as it's going to get, it's time for us to prepare the rub. For that, you can look at mixing your own, but personally I don't really find it worth it. You can get perfectly good jerk seasonings, or in this case I just use steak seasoning. I find it perfectly adequate, perfectly tasty. So you're going to need a Ziploc bag. It just does up at the top. Into that we're putting 2 tablespoons of coriander. Then what will be the last 2 tablespoons of my steak seasoning. Pop that in there. And to the bag we then just add the meat. So that's still here on the side, it's still sitting on its J cloth. We just add that into the bag. Just put it all in, it's fine. I find this the easiest way to add the rub to such small pieces of meat. With the biltong we could just rub it in by hand, but with jerky every piece is so small it takes forever if you do it like that. So just there. Note I've left a bit of air in the bag, that just gives them space to move around. Then once we're well coated, we're ready to go. And you can see each piece gets a nice even coating of the rub, so it's ready to be hung now. To hang my meat, I use these. This is actually just a perfectly normal paper clip. Don't need anything special, they just bend in half and then bingo, you've got a perfect little meat hook just there. And they're dead easy to clean as well. You can keep them and use them several times. I just pour boiling water on them once they've been used once, then put them back into storage. So you just need to take out each individual piece of meat, thread it onto its hook. And then once each one is hooking, we'll be good to put them into the jerky dehydrator. So here's a quick view just of the little jerkies once they're hanging up inside our dehydrator. Hang them up so that none of them touch each other. Make sure that there's at least a little space in between each one, just to make sure that the air can get around them and they dry nice and evenly. Note in this one as well, I'm not using the fan that we have used in the past. It's really not necessary for the jerky. You'll find it dries in about 4 hours for the sort of heaviest pieces. My thickest piece would be that one. I'd expect that to take around 4 hours, but the smaller ones are probably going to take less than 2. That's fine though, because I can just remove them sooner or move the thicker ones closer to the heat source. So remember that we set this one up with the vivarium bulb, so it is going to get really hot in the box as well, so just make sure that nothing touches the lamp once it's all set off. So we'll just get that one going. Go. Takes around 5 minutes to heat up, and we'll come back when they're all done. So here we are 4 hours later, and here's our completed jerky. As you can see, I've taken it out of the dehydrator and I've just sort of knocked off the excess spices. Mine's still quite coated in the spice. You might want to use slightly less if you'd rather have more of a beefy flavour and less of a steak seasoning flavour. But I like mine quite seasoned, so it's entirely up to you. Just have a bit of a play around and see what recipe suits your tastes best. These pieces, I'll probably leave them as they are, to be honest. The bigger pieces I might cut down in half just to make a more manageable size, but that's it. That's all you need to do to make jerky, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy making yours.